Hi, I am A.F. Winter, and this is Confusional Arousals. In October, I will release Cinderella's End, Part 2, Where Evil Lives, in book form. I released the print copy of Cinderella's End, Part 1, in 2017. To build excitement, I have released Part 1 as an ebook. It is available on Amazon and can be found on either of my websites, my podcast at www.confusionalarousals.com in the book section, or on my writer's website, www.afwinter.com on the Cinderella's End page. Cinderella's End, Part 1, The Revenge of the Witch, is a reimagining of the original story, following Cinderella as she adjusts to castle life and her role as a royal. This is not a spoiler, but things do not end happily ever after. Not just yet. It is chock full of evil witches, deformed monsters, abductions, emotional affairs, and castle intrigue. Please enjoy this book, which started it all in either print or ebook format. And now, back to your regularly scheduled programming. Last week I had an epiphany. Donald Trump is the Buddha. In today's episode, I would like to explain why. Wait, all the Buddhists have just left the room. All right, they weren't that much of my audience. No harm done there. Oh, the liberal democratic socialists just got up as well. They were the largest segment of my audience. Hey, the Christians left. And now the right-wing militias have gone. No matter, I can tell that my one true devoted follower will never desert me. I love you. Oh wait, she's gone. No matter, I will explain the idea to myself because, to be truthful, it does seem to me to be full of holes. Regardless. Reality in Buddhism is called Dharma. The problem is that so much of reality is driven by fear. We are afraid of the stranger, afraid that people are going to take our guns, afraid that we won't be able to buy milk at the grocery store. Life, according to the Buddha, is a dream, a bubble, a shadow. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is worthy of anger or dispute. There is this notion in Buddhism that all life is an illusion. Now, who has shown us better that our country is an illusion than President Trump? Think of how your parents viewed this country, how they taught us to believe in America. What did our founding fathers hope for this country? I say hope because it wasn't a reality when they were around. All men are created equal, for instance. I don't think anybody actually believes that everyone is equal in our country. The right certainly doesn't. They believe that their country is being taken away from them by foreigners. The left doesn't believe that all people are created equal. I think they feel that the wealthy are manipulating the very gullible Trumpers. Nobody really believes in this equality stuff. And who is the one to show us that it is all an illusion? Donald J. Trump. He has shown us that it was a bubble by popping it. We talked about Buddha. Maybe next I should talk about Nietzsche. Seems like a logical progression. And to me, in my warped notion of reality, here is why. Trump has shown us that all is illusion. He has held himself up as a higher being because only he can save us. Nietzsche came up with the concept of the Übermensch, which is the notion of an ideal superior man of the future who could rise above conventional Christian morality to create and impose his own values, originally described by Nietzsche in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, written between 1883 and 85. People have misinterpreted this as being an authoritarian leader who destroys society to make it in his image. Hitler misinterpreted it in his idea of the master race. But these values are not egocentric. They are altruistic for the betterment of all people. We live in a great country, rich and powerful. Why do 20% of our children go to bed hungry every night? We do not have Übermensches ruling us. Other concepts in Zarathustra are the death of God, which is not literal, but refers to the decline of traditional spiritual beliefs and values. I don't think there's anybody in the right that would disagree with that, but they're like the people that are doing it the most, kinda. Saying things like Jesus approves of the Second Amendment is a great example. The Prince of Peace would never approve of using a weapon against another person. The warped thinking that goes into this perverse idea proves the decline of our beliefs. Calling the immigrant a criminal or the needy lazy is another example. Of course, some immigrants are bad people. Some people on public assistance are lazy. And there are a very small number of situations where gun violence would be necessary. But to live your life as if those rare situations should be our guiding principles is working against what just about every religion is preaching. Another concept is the will to power. Nietzsche's central concept of will to power is not about domination over others, but rather the inherent drive within all people to grow, to overcome, and create. It is the force that pushes us to transform potential into reality and impose meaning on a meaningless world. Think of all the great scientific discoveries and great works of art that go beyond the mundane. It is why we want to do better. Hitler misinterpreted this concept as well, along with the Übermensch, to say that there are some people who are superior to others. And the job of those superior people is to subjugate the weaker people. What Nietzsche, I believe, is saying here is that we all have potential, and it is up to the individual to find their own meaning. He is talking about a personal quest, not world domination. Nietzsche also talks about eternal recurrence. This is an idea that asks the reader to imagine that their life, with all its joys and sorrows, will be repeated infinitely. This is similar to my whole afterlife concept of living your whole life eternally from the viewpoint of the other person. Nietzsche, and I hope that this eternal recurrence will force individuals to examine their values and actions, encouraging them to choose a life that they would want to repeat forever. If I am thinking about doing something evil, would I still do it if I knew I would be stuck reliving that pain that I've caused others by my actions eternally? Now, to be clear, Nietzsche thought that this idea is more of a thought experiment, whereas I believe this is an actual thing. I guess I will let you, dear listener, decide who is right. And I guess you have already, because whose podcast are you listening to? Nietzsche. Even though thus spoke Zarathustra did not give us the meaning of life, it encourages individuals to actively create their own meaning by embracing life, challenging traditional values, and striving to become an Übermensch. He turned from the nihilism of a deterministic, organized religion that life is meaningless because everything has been decided, to a philosophy that was life-affirming and embraced creativity. Other writers of the late 19th century were also struggling with a person's role in society. George Bernard Shaw explores many of the same ideas in his play Man and Superman. His Superman, John Tanner, decided to negate the rules of society regarding traditional values and societal norms. The existentialists, who wouldn't even be around for another 50 or so years, argued that the individual gives themselves meaning, not some religious doctrine written thousands of years ago. We have the right to choose which direction we should go in our lives, but we do not have the freedom not to choose. If we don't make a choice, we are making a bad choice. By remaining silent in the face of injustice, we become complicit in that injustice. One more thing about Nietzsche. He said something interesting about philosophy in Beyond Good and Evil. I'd like to read some sections to you, and I do skip around a bit. When he says the will to, he means the desire for. At least that's how I'm interpreting. In fact, I'm just going to read it, the desire, instead of will. All right. In the beginning of his book. The desire for truth, which tempts us to many a hazardous enterprise, the famous truthfulness of which all philosophers have spoken with respect, what questions has this desire for truth not laid before us? It means he's asking us a lot of questions. What strange, perplexing, questionable questions? Is already a long story. Yet it seems as if it were hardly commenced. Is it any wonder if we at last grow distrustful, lose patience, and turn impatiently away, until at last we come to an absolute standstill before a yet more fundamental question? What is the value of this desire? Why are we even looking for truth? Granted that we all want truth. But why not rather untruth and uncertainty and ignorance? The problem of the value of truth presented itself before us, or was it we who presented ourselves before the problem? I go to bed reading this. This is how I go to sleep. This is my bedtime story. Anyway, this is me again, not Nietzsche. I know we sound very similar at times. We all have this desire to pursue truth, but truth is nebulous, ephemeral. What even is truth? The interweb has two definitions. One, truth is that which is true or in accordance with fact or reality. Okay, now things start getting sticky. What is reality? Oxford defines reality as the world or the state of things as they actually exist, as opposed to an idealistic or notional idea of them. But what thing exists without our perception of it? And perception takes the perceiver's emotions and experiences into the mix, which makes everything in the world an illusion. So, no, if a tree falls in the forest, it doesn't make a sound. And no, if a bear shits in the forest, it don't smell. And finally, it is not a question of whether Schopenhauer's cat is alive or dead. If it is in a box and I don't see, hear, or smell it, it simply doesn't exist. There, I'm glad I've been able to resolve that issue. Getting back to our second definition of truth, put forth by the interweb. Truth is a fact or belief that is accepted as true. Accepted as true. So, in the second definition of truth, something doesn't have to be true. It only has to be accepted as true. In this time, as in all times, it seems, truth changes depending on who is in charge and what philosophy we believe in at the moment. Back to Nietzsche, a little later in his book. But this is an old and everlasting story. What happens in old times with the Stoics, ancient philosophers whose guiding principle of courage, temperance, justice, and wisdom were used to secure a meaningful life. What happened in the old times with the Stoics still happens today. As soon as a philosophy begins to believe in itself, it always creates the world in its own image. It cannot do otherwise. Philosophy is this tyrannical impulse itself, the most spiritual will to power, the will to creation of the world, the will to the causa prima. Causa prima is the original cause of something. If you are a godless scientist, the Big Bang Theory. If you are some religious zealot, God. To recap, philosophy and religion always wants us to seek out the truth, but these belief systems create the world they want us to believe in. Truth, justice, and the American way was created so we wouldn't see how stupid those ideas are, and we'd buy into this fantasy. What is truth? It depends on who you ask. What is justice? It depends how rich you are. What is the American way? Well, don't get me started on that. The last quote from Nietzsche. Every elevation of the righteous individual has been the work of an aristocratic society, and so it will always be. A society believing in a long scale of gradations of rank and differences of worth among human beings, and requiring slavery in some form or another. So, the rich and powerful create a hierarchy in our society, with them at the top, and which always includes some sort of slavery. Nietzsche, again. To be sure, one must not resign oneself to any humanitarian illusions about the history of the origin of the aristocratic society. The truth is hard. Let us acknowledge unprejudicially how every higher civilization has originated. Barbarians in every terrible sense of the word, men of prey with a desire for power, threw themselves upon weaker, more moral, more peaceful races. At the commencement, the noble caste was always a barbarian caste. So, here is my take on Beyond Good and Evil at this moment. It might change by the time I finish. All right, here we are. Vicious, cruel individuals who craved power attacked previous societies. Once in power, they created philosophies that justified their actions, making those terrible deeds seem as if they were inspired by a higher being. A philosophy, the desire to find truth, is then used to keep the weak and disenfranchised as slaves for the rich and powerful. This continues until the rich get so rich that they actually believe this nonsense that they are spewing out, and the powerful become complacent because they think nothing can bring them down. Then another, more vicious and desperate group of people seizes control and creates their own origin story and moral philosophy. There's an old expression: history is written by the victors. This happened in Rome. This happened during the French Revolution. This happened for the Assad regime. And I fear it is happening in America right now. Unfortunately, the weak and disenfranchised, who are promised equality and justice, are forced to serve new masters. Their lot never changes. The rich and powerful use smoke and mirrors, but it is all illusion, just as the Buddha said, just as Trump has shown our democracy to be. I am A.F. Winter, and this has been Confusional Arousals.
Never was what we had thought. It never was as we were taught. Why did our parents tell us so? Did they lie or just not know? And so the story goes, the Uber Donald came to town to tear our misconceptions down. All is an illusion, so he says. No could stop me, 'cause I'm the prez. Reality fades in a matter of days. Those who need the most will get the least. And once again, we have been fleeced. Promises made that quickly fade in a world of shadows where deals are made. The Uber Elon came to town to tear our institutions down, firing his rockets at mosquitoes, stealing state secrets incognito. So many lies that we've been told, stretching back to days of old. Smoke and mirrors is the game. Everyone should share the shame.